Money doesn't just come from one place. It drips, trickles, flows, and floods into our lives in different ways. Welcome to Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood, a podcast that explores the power of multiple income streams. We've got merch. That's right. Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood t-shirts are officially here, and they're as comfy as they are conversation starting. Grab yours at the link in our show notes. Hey, Tony, how are you?
Great. How are you, Melissa?
Good. What are you up to today?
Well, I was working on the Drip Trickle Flow Flood book cover. So yeah, we're gonna chat about that here in a little bit. So that's exciting. And then
Yes.
then it's a rental afternoon. I've got a bunch of showings to go do. So fingers crossed,
Oh,
places rent, good tenants, all that. So
is this commercial properties or residential?
uh one commercial, one single family house, one multifamily. So I've got the
Nice.
got to
Okay.
get in one. I'm actually meeting at the single family house, and we're going to drive over, and they're my first showing at the multifamily. So,
Oh,
so we'll see.
cool.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well, we're sending out good luck for that. Good luck for positive showings. Well, we have an interesting topic today. This was an article that you sent over to me, Tony, from MoneyWise, and we'll link to it in our show notes. The headline of the article is "The Baby Boomers' American Dream is Dead. The younger generations are replacing it with something more personal." So essentially, what this is saying is that younger Americans, especially Gen Z, are not interested in the traditional American dream anymore. And to them, saving for years to buy a home or to cover a comfortable retirement is becoming a pipe dream. It's really not their goal for living today. So, what are your thoughts initially on this, Tony?
I would say, I don't know in what order, but concern and envy. Um, you know,
Mhm.
I frankly, and I think I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I had kind of the opposite mentality where I was like, you know, I financial security was of the utmost importance to me. And I saw by creating financial security as my way to create flexibility and freedom, where this is kind of a totally different mindset where it says we're going to live for today. If I've got enough money for today, for this week to do what I want to do, then I'm happy. Yeah. What's your initial takeaway on it?
Yeah, I think a little bit similarly to you, the concern and a little bit of envy as well. I mean, I love the idea that they're opting out of the status norm, right? The status quo. I like that they're reimagining new ways of living. And I really like, I don't do it, but I like the idea of, living for today. And it's like, we don't know how long we have on this planet, of course. So nobody does. So I do like that idea of like, yeah, let's just embrace what we've got right now. And I think there's a lot of like beauty and freedom in that. And then at the same time, there are realities that do come up later in life. Um, things that I think you and I probably because of the ages that we are, although I know we were also thinking about this younger as well. We're a little bit more directed in that area where it's like, well, what does this look like for us? Neither of us wants to retire. You and Lindsay don't want to retire. Gary and I don't want to retire, but we are looking at like having a life. I like to think of it as work optional. There's a book called Work Optional I brought up before. Or what does your life look like? Right. You may still want to work in some capacity, but you don't want to have to rely on it. So what does that look like? And then where is that income coming from? Because the reality is that we live in a capitalistic society. So we definitely need to earn money to live. So I think there's a little bit of both sides. And what I'd be curious, and maybe we'll have to have a guest who is, I don't think we've had a lot of guests in that generation. So maybe we need to have a few on. Because I think what this article doesn't necessarily dig into, because it's just looking at larger data, is well, what is their plan, right? So what is, I understand they're living for today, but there's obviously something going on. I mean, is there like any 401k? Is there like any investments happening? Is it just pure like who cares and we're living for today? I'd like to know some different folks' stories in that generation because I know they don't all look the same, of course, but it would be interesting. Like maybe there are other ways they're thinking of this that we haven't even thought of.
Yeah, I think we should. I actually have a couple people that I'm interested in bringing on. One is actually the son of one of our previous guests. I haven't reached out to him yet, but I think that could be an interesting person just because of the way he's living. And then I actually just met at a wedding over the weekend this young woman who went to college for environmental science and decided that what she wants to do is be out working with her hands. And she's currently a gravedigger, running a machine, being a grave. And I'm just like, how
Okay, that's
that's I
cool.
would have never even thought about it. And I was like, "Do you wanna come on the podcast?" And she said, "Yeah." So, I think that's a great idea to have some people on, from that segment of the, um, population that, is living differently, or at least around people that are living differently. I have to say, they act like this is a big epiphany.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's just because that generation has such a big voice now with social media and everything else. Because I know that when I was that age, I was definitely in the minority of people that was thinking ahead, planning for the future, investing, savings. I mean, I had plenty of friends that if they had enough money to go out to the bar, they were happy for the night. So I don't know that that sentiment for people in their 20s or whatever is totally different, but I think it's out there more. Uh,
Mm.
although I do think there was always like the mindset of, okay, eventually I'll have a house and retire and those sorts of things. So, I mean, we talked about this in the rent versus own episode. I'm not like this, you have to own your primary residence person. Often your primary residence is not actually a very good investment. So that part of it I don't have any problem with. What makes me concerned is if they aren't investing for the future. And a big, my concern in that is just, the power of compounding interest is such an important thing. So if in your 20s you're saving that money, investing that, even if you're just in a savings account with interest, it's still compounding, but stocks. And then when I think about the fact that they're not into buying houses, you know, I understand it's been really, really hard to buy houses for quite a while. The market's just been going like crazy. But the reality is the current market probably, I mean, it's definitely shifted to a buyer's market.
Mhm.
And uh prices haven't been going up. We've seen prices declining in some environments. And yes, interest rates feel really high, but historically, these are pretty normal or even on the lower end side of interest rates. Interest rates were, around these current rates where you're borrowing in the sixes and sevens when I was getting started. So, and the reason I point that out is when you're young and don't have any money, real estate can be such a powerful thing because of leverage, right? You're essentially gaining equity on money you don't have. So it's interesting, right? So we think about these things. If they're truly not investing, they're living for today, they're spending most of what they're earning. Does that mean people are going to be working longer? And maybe that's something that they've accepted that they're going to have to
Yeah.
work essentially forever.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, living for now, working fewer hours, taking more vacations, um, maybe that's brilliant. Maybe that's exactly how they should be living. And maybe they'll be healthier longer as a result. And they're getting to enjoy the healthiest parts of their lives. And if that they love, you and I never want to retire. Um, so maybe,
Right.
maybe, maybe grinding in our 20s and 30s and into our 40s maybe that was a mistake if we're just gonna work forever anyways. Um, so maybe there's a lot of wisdom in this generation too. And
Yeah.
I'm not one to say the way that I went about it is the only way to do it or even the right way. Um, so
I
what do
agree.
you think they're
Uh,
gonna their mind at some point? Uh,
no. No, because no, I think and again, what do I know? I think we have to talk to them because obviously they're going to be the experts on what they're doing in their lives. But honestly, no, because I think actually what a lot of folks are doing is sort of adopting a mindset that I find a lot of people do in larger city populations, and I'll call them like the striving cities. So I've lived in Los Angeles for 10 years and I used to work up in Manhattan for a big chunk of time, maybe like 5 or 6 years. And what was so different about those cities versus like living here now, I guess are we considered a suburb where we are here?
I don't
Is
know. I
this,
mean, we're a
I don't know, whatever.
small city. I mean, I live
Small
out north.
city.
You
So anyway,
country, but yeah,
we're either in a small city or a suburb. I don't know. Um, I definitely lived in a true suburb in the past as well. But I think there is a different mindset. Like what I noticed is in the career that I'm in, I work mostly in the entertainment industry. And again, like I said, I worked for a long time in Los Angeles and still very much do because my clients are there and projects I do are there. Um, your heyday is actually in your 50s and 60s. Like your career doesn't actually really start to take off until those years. So like when people are talking about like golden years and talking about like this is when you're retiring, it's funny because that's not the mentality at all, right? It's generally like, you are building something in potentially an industry that's hard to crack into, right? Or hard to have success in. And then by the time that success locks together, the puzzle locks together, you're in your 50s or 60s. And like my friend's mom, she was one of the producers of Hadestown, which is a huge hit Broadway musical that won a Tony Award and has gone on to become a feature film now. She was in her 70s when that happened. And I mean, and it's still happening. I mean, there's still things unfurling from this one project. And so again, like she never retired. It's just like, I mean, that was never even the thought. It was just like she was an opera singer for many years and then a producer for many years. It was never even a thought of like, oh, I need to, not to say they weren't doing things financially to create security, right? I don't know their specific makeup. But what I'm saying is, it's like that wasn't really the discussion. The discussion is more like my career is still blossoming and it's going to continue blossoming. And my best work may not be until I'm 70 years old. And so I think that that's also an outlook that I see lots of people have. And to your point, it may just be that they're like, why are we grinding in our 20s when, like, with our best work is probably not going to happen until much later? And we could argue that, well, you're working your way up to your best work because in your 20s, you have to, be boots on the ground. Sure. But like a lot of the ways we become, let's say, good at business or good at work is like through life skills. So if we're not out there learning and we're just trapped behind a computer on Zoom all day in these pointless, endless meetings, I'm not really sure what you're learning from that. But I could
I think
see learning a lot from going and bootstrapping it and maybe backpacking across, I'm making this up, like backpacking across Europe. I mean, I think you learn a lot more doing that than you would sitting in front of a laptop in pointless Zoom meetings, arguing over a memo or something.
well, let's talk about age a little bit. So like when I first um got into a management position in construction, I battled being young. Everybody says, "How could you possibly know anything?" You know, uh, it was hard with employees, it was hard with customers, it was hard with subcontractors because they assumed I didn't have any experience.
Mhm.
And they say, "Well, how long have you been doing this?" And I'm like, "Well, 10 years." And they go, "Well, you're only 25. How's that possible?" I'm like, "Well, I started when I was 15." But, you know, that was a battle. And so I think what you're talking about is you definitely reach an age where whether it's correct or not, you start gaining some respect just because of how you look, the perceived experience, that sort of thing. But the same thing happens on the other end too, right? You reach a certain age where people go, well, they probably don't know what they're doing because they're too old. At least, entertainment is different, um, because in entertainment, like you said, it takes a long time to get established a lot of the time and all those sorts of things. And obviously we see, actors for sure that, often act, you know, up until literally the very end. However, in other industries, especially I would say things that are tech based, I'd say there's like some pretty severe ageism that goes on. And then there's like physical jobs that you can't necessarily perform as well as you could at a younger age. And so I think I think there's no one right answer, but I think understanding your position, right? If you're going to be a carpenter, well, being a carpenter in your 70s is hard. There's people that do it,
Sure.
but it's hard. Maybe being a writer, you better plan on doing it in your 70s because it's probably going to take you that long for anybody to care. Uh, at least that's the pace I'm on. And then the so things like that. For me, what I think is if these people are making enough money, whether they're freelancing or just taking time off or however they're doing this to go take these trips, to live life to the fullest, man, I would follow that rule of take some of that money, scale back whatever you're doing a little bit so that you can start stashing some of it away.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean you have to go buy a house. We're going to talk about, more passive investments in the next episode. And that's what I would be targeting is still putting some away so that you have this money working for you. Because the reality is as much as we don't know how long we're going to live and to enjoy life for the moment, I think is great advice. I think that getting those experiences is all great. We also don't know what life's going to throw at us. And there may be a moment where you need some money, you need that pile of cash, or you need that income coming in because you get sick, or you got to take care of somebody, or even just your car breaks down, or your dog has to go to just like whatever. I think having a parallel plan, a parallel income. And I think that's a lot of what drip, trickle, flow, flood is all about, right? Is having those other income streams that can fuel this life, whatever that you want that life to look like. So it's really interesting to me. And I guess I'm curious, we talked about in one episode how the demographic of women or the makeup of women having more money and so maybe more female financial advisors would be something, you know, is the job of financial advisors a viable career long term if people aren't investing in that way? Are people
Well,
putting
potentially. I mean, yeah, I think you bring up a good point, but I think it's they're going to have to speak the language of this generation, right? Whether no matter the gender. It's like if this is what this upcoming generation is doing and saying, well, then when you step into their office, or they're going to have to market to find you, right? They're going to have to do ways or find ways to do that and to speak your language so that you are attracted to that type of thing. So, I mean, back to just to bring up an example, because you mentioned like certain industries, um, maybe you won't be able to work in as you age, right? And so you brought up tech as one of them. That is actually very common, right? For them to do these like sort of forced layoffs, unfortunately. Um, however, I know lots of people who work in tech and they're already aware. It's very well known that that happens, right? So the way that this generation, Gen Z, is entering that space is they're going, I'm just going to go, all right, I'm going to go to Google, right? I'm going to work there for 3 years. I'm going to make bank. I'm going to live in an RV while I do it. So I have extremely low expenses. and I'm going to really just take down my expenses anywhere I can, right? Live very, very cheaply. And then I'm going to leave. And then I'm going to go not work and take a sabbatical for a year because I haven't really spent any money, right? But I've now recouped all of this money. And then from there, I don't know if they're investing. I don't know if that they may be, right? There may be other things going on with that like lump sum of money that's come in. But then a couple years later, they just go and do some gig work or some consulting because that's sort of the thing when you get out of that, right? There's sometimes linear paths that you can go on that really it doesn't matter your age, or sometimes it actually behooves you to be older because then you're stepping in and saying, I have 30 years experience in this. Now, does that happen if you're a carpenter? I don't know. I mean, you would know. I wouldn't know.
I
But
mean,
like certainly in some industries it does.
it certainly does. And I think in all industries, there is a level of experience, knowledge, all of those things. And if you can become a project manager or you're doing finished
Mhm.
carpentry or whatever, there is an evolution of a carpenter. Um, and I think of right a logger, right? You can move into now you're working in the loader or you're driving truck. And most industries there are places to go
Mhm.
rising up. It seems like there's at every it's a pyramid, right? And the top of the pyramid is a point, and so there's just not as many positions at the top.
Sure. Mhm.
So yeah, no, that's I think the that working, making a bunch of money, and maybe they are being savvy, and maybe they're I
Yeah.
don't know buying crypto. Obviously, something's you know
Maybe. I mean, that's where I kind of feel like articles like this are tough because we're not really getting the full picture. To me, this reads very much like they're not getting corporate jobs, they're not going into middle management, and they're not investing in real estate. Like I'm hearing, like, this is what I'm taking of this. Well, that's the reality nowadays, right? I mean, there lots of people don't want corporate America because they know that there's often more you have more control when you go out on your own. It's not easy to own your own business or to be a gig worker, but you often will have more freedom. So people are going that route, especially in this generation. And then to your point about real estate, like maybe that's not the right move for everybody. Like that just isn't where they want to invest their money right now or potentially ever. And that's like also okay because there are plenty of other ways that you can invest. And then as far as like management, no, I mean, that's everywhere right now. No one wants to be a manager. I worked inside a tech company for a year on the consulting side, and nobody wanted a promotion. I mean, it was like at first I was shocked, right? Because when I was coming up and I'm Gen X, that was like, you were like, I want to be a manager. It was like you were just so excited to be, and I don't know why, because frankly, I don't find it fun to be a manager. But it was like the thing I guess you were supposed to want. And some people are really great at it, and that is their path. But I was just seeing, oh, everybody wanted to be an individual contributor. Like, no, why would I want to take on extra stress and extra work to manage people? The money that you're going to give me to do that is not enough. I remember being shocked by this, but now it is a huge trend. And frankly, I understand it. I understand why, because it really often isn't worth it unless you have a real heart and passion for it. It is a lot of stress for not a lot of extra income.
so okay, so let's say a 22-year-old comes to Melissa and says, I wanna write, I wanna make movie scripts. I want to do this and that, but I also, I don't have any interest in having a full-time job. I just want to work.
Mhm.
What advice would you give them for not necessarily cracking in, because that's a whole nother discussion, but let's say that they're able to generate income writing and doing what they want. What advice would you give them as far as like what should they be doing with their money? How should they spend their, you know, division of time working versus time not working? Uh,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of obviously being a gig worker or starting your own business, depending. And writing is one of the best positions to do that because obviously most writing jobs are freelance. So it's that's kind of the direction you're probably going to go in anyway. Um, or sometimes, because it really depends on the person, sometimes it's better for them to work in a completely different industry and then leave their brain open to write for like their personal projects that they want to sell. Everybody's wired differently, so that's just really dependent on what they're doing. Um, but I would say, finding a flow, whatever that may be, maybe that's writing specific or maybe it's not. And then piecemealing out that flow to make sure that you are number one, leaving some for taxes. Number two, leaving a portion for investing. And that may not be a lot at first. Like I'm a big fan of, look, I wasn't investing that much when I was 22 either, but there was like a small amount going in. So that's looking into like an individual IRA, maybe something like that, right? So I don't have the exact answer, but just having something, even if it's a high yield savings account, just something to like start that muscle of putting a percentage of your income aside. Um, and then I would say, also investing in your future career. So, like having a piece of that pie go into a separate account that could be a high yield savings or whatever. Maybe you want to put it in something else because you're not going to touch it for a while that would earn more of a percentage of interest. Um, but something that's like, well, something's got to fund that down the line. So if you want to be a screenwriter, you're probably going to need to take classes. You may need to pay for a consultant to help you with work. You may need to pay to go to some networking in Los Angeles, right? So you're going to need to fund those things in some way. So it's good to start like piecing that out so that you're investing in your own business and IP, right? That's going to turn into IP. And then also investing in some other way, high yield savings, individual IRA, whatever. And then also, obviously, having a flow for your bills. That's just what I would say is a simplistic start.
I like that. I don't usually think about the investing in myself thing. I went to college, I went to real estate school, I've done some other certificates around coaching and things like that. But I kind of always forget that that's something to keep doing. And I think Warren Buffett says that's like the best thing to invest in is in yourself. And if you gain a skill, gain a knowledge, that's something that you never, you don't lose, you have it. And I'm not, I read a lot. I try to always learn. I practice. I don't take a lot of classes. I don't go to, and actually Lindsay and I were just talking about that. She's thinking about, maybe going back to school for graphic design. And she's been looking
Mhm.
at, full on BA programs and also certificates and, really
That's cool.
part of she wants to get, she has her own business doing design and she loves it. And she goes, well, what else could I learn if I went and did this? And,
Mhm.
so that is interesting. I like that piece a lot. And maybe that solves a lot of where my brain has a concern of, okay, what are you going to do in the future if
Mhm.
you're working for most of your life? How does that work world evolve? And I guess if you're continuing to educate, continuing to get new skills, you could change total careers, you could combine skills. Who knows?
Yeah.
So I think that I think that's a great solution to a lot of I'm nervous for these people that are not not setting up themselves necessarily for that long-term financial security. But like I said, I'm also envious that they're so comfortable in their own skin to do that.
Mhm. I mean, another little piece or maybe nuance to this too is like that generation is very much in the creator economy, right? So they grew up with social media and many of them make money on social media, right? I mean, even if it's just a few dollars a month, like they're in the TikTok creator fund. I mean, they're making something and some are making a heck of a lot more than both of us probably combined to make in a single post. And so I think when you see those possibilities, right, because you can't be what you can't see. And so when we grew up, we didn't have that. Maybe we had like MySpace when we were in. Like, nobody
Oh,
was really making much money on there. It was coming
MySpace
back.
is MySpace is coming back.
They're making a triumphant comeback. I mean, we'll see.
I can get my wall back active.
Oh, so yeah, we'll see how that goes. Maybe, I mean, it might be great, but I do think that that has changed the game for a lot of folks because there's a couple things going on there. One is I think there's always and look, I make money off the creator economy myself, right? So I understand it. There's a lot of potential there. You can work as hard or as little as you want. And like it does feel like endless potential in a way. And it's not age specific. Like, in fact, there's less people our age doing it. So there's actually more potential. Like, so there's lots of people our age, like just getting into that and able to make a great living. For, reason not to say it's easy work, but it's like certainly not as hard as like going and building a house, for example. So that's one opportunity. And then another thing is because we have these vehicles now where we're able to meet and see other people from all over the world doing all sorts of cool things, this generation is looking at that and going, oh, well, here's this woman I'm seeing in her 60s who is so happy. And, she has a business selling plant starters. Yeah, I'm just making this up, but like these things are all over. I mean, you could go on TikTok and spend, 5 years looking at all different examples of all cool things that you can do to be financially secure, all sorts of things, whether it's a business, whether it's different ways of investing, different things to invest in. So there's so many options. And I think that generation has grown up seeing possibility where our generation didn't necessarily see that, or we saw like, yeah, your one possibility is go to college, work your ass off, then become a manager, then hope you don't get fired, then max out your 401k and then retire. Like that's kind of the general trajectory that a large chunk of Gen X and in some cases probably elder millennial too. But certainly for Gen Z, like they're looking at a lot more possibility. So, I mean, that might be informing the way that they're moving through life. And I dig it. I'm into it. I mean, yes, there is a little concern. I hope that they're setting themselves up financially, but like they may be. And that's where I'm like, I don't think this article even addressed that really. So, like, I think I would rather be like, let's talk to that generation and see what they're doing because they very well may be setting themselves up in a great way.
Yeah. And I guess with things like Robinhood and it is
Mhm.
so easy to be investing. And I guess if you just listen to Warren Buffett and you're just putting money in an index fund,
Yeah,
uh,
exactly. Hmm.
they might be stoked when they get into their 50s or whatever, right? So
Yeah, I'm
really
exactly.
cool. It is interesting, and I'm curious to see what happens with as this generation gets a little older and they start having kids and that sort of thing. Are they going to want houses? Is what they want going to change, or are even with their kids, they're just going to live a little more free, where
Hmm.
maybe they have fewer kids and they're still RVing around the country, or
Yep.
maybe it's still a rental house and they move more, or they're in the rental house while their kids are certain ages and then move. So I think it's cool. I think it's fun. I mean, I think that's what makes, you know, America what it is, right? Is this free spirit of what are we gonna
Hmm.
do next? What's the next generation gonna do? What's the next generation gonna create? And I don't think it would be a bad thing if what this generation is creating is us spending more of our time doing, pleasurable things in life, being outside, exploring, interacting with
Hmm.
people. So pretty neat,
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
lot of levels. I just hope that they're stashing away. And if there's anybody out there that feels like they're not saving enough, I do think the value of leverage at a young age is super powerful.
Definitely. And we're going to have an episode after this one that's going to talk about other ways that you can make up your drip, trickle, flow, flood. That doesn't mean starting a bunch of businesses and stressing yourself out. So, or having seven different jobs, because that's really just one piece of the pie. So make sure that you listen to that. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. That helps us to find more people who need advice just like this. And with that said, we'll see you next time on Drip Trickle Flow Blood. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye now.